afternoon, I'm Daniel Miller and this is my daily podcast for Wednesday, 19th of May of 2021. A warm welcome to all of our friends, fans, community members, participants and viewers on various platforms worldwide, and thank you for coming today and for being dedicated members of our community here online on my channel on Twitch. Thank you for watching our podcast and supporting all we do here with our community. A very bright sunny day here today, very different to the last 5 or 6 which were extremely wet, cloudy and drizzly. So I'm pleased to say it's warm and pleasant, and I've seen nothing of it because I've been indoors and had to do my usual drill of admin, exercise, preparation for the stream, and I really want to get up before 8, but for whatever reason it didn't happen, and therefore I was yet again slightly delayed. I think I really have to change my schedule for the evening works. I usually go for my dinner and then I watch a film or 2 films in fact before going to bed, so I have to bring everything forward. So maybe we are going to be cracking on with our podcast somewhat earlier, with our broadcast earlier in the day, in order to liberate the space in the evening, because I have to be in bed probably by midnight rather than 1 o'clock, and that is making it difficult. I talked a lot about here, look at the brain not working properly. I talked a lot here about COVID and viral infections, because I had contracted a nasty swine flu viral infection in I think it was October 2007, and the main symptoms didn't really transpire until a few months later. So it was around Christmas of 2007 I began to feel really seriously unwell and affected neurologically, and then I had very severe symptoms through which I had abnormal sensations in muscles and pains and cramps and dizziness and all sorts of things. And it was diagnosed as post-viral ME, which in fact was very severe, and for somebody who was as healthy and as fit as myself, it was a true shock, really a shell shock taking place overnight. So from AAA military fitness I've gone down to almost, I won't say immobility, but being bedbound, and it was very difficult to do anything for, well, certainly a period of first 12 months, but then with physio and with all the therapies and Chinese acupuncture and osteopathy, coupled with swimming and exercise on a daily basis, really brought me back to life. And I'm still not fully recovered, and it's been many years later. So it's one of those things. My sleeping pattern and sleeping cycle had been affected by that, and never ever has it been back to normal, to the way it was. So for instance, if I go to bed a bit later, let's say around 1 o'clock, then I need more sleep compared to if I went to bed before midnight. But my biological cycle is not geared towards me going to bed 9 o'clock in the evening. It's just the way my whole life's been run. I always had a lot of heavy going evening activities due to the nature of my professional works, and it's just the way it's been. So it's been adapted to this. So very frequently I feel quite tired around 1 o'clock in the morning, or between 12 and 1. So that's the best time for me to go to bed. But I think generally it probably would have been a lot better for me in terms of my routine and the overall cycle, everyday cycle I should say, to go to bed before midnight, maybe 11 o'clock or so. But I really have to work on that, a bit like having a task, having a structure, having a plan how you are going to be accomplishing certain aims. Obviously I'm no longer in the blossoms of my youth, and therefore there are also other changes occurring, and I'm surprised because quite frankly, as I'm pushing on, I have a need for a lengthier sleep compared to when I was younger, and generally you will find that people of a certain age are, well, I'm not really as yet, 70 plus, but it's just a little bit strange. So I really have to be considering all these factors and reorganizing my time, effort, and activities. So I apologize really for some of these delays, and try to really adhere to the structure, and I want to always provide you with the very best content. So yeah, it's one of those things. The other day I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and just the whole day seemed like really lengthy and bright, and it's funny really, the perception of time. I talked about it here as well. Sometimes you get a feeling that the day is very, very long. Other times it feels like it's all very short. Depends on age, activity, your environment, what you do, how you organize your time. There are lots of different factors in there. And I think if you are doing things that you actually dislike doing, then the day is infinitely long. It just never ends. If you're doing things that you love doing, like myself, for more than 40 years, then the day just goes by, and you look back and think, oh, I've done all of these things, and time's just gone by, and it's been so enjoyable. You don't feel any pressure, you don't feel any burdens of it, and that's where the greatest difference really is in the experience of your day-to-day activity, your time, and everything else. So yesterday we had a very, very good gaming session here, completely smitten by the quality of Season of the Splicer, destined to be on light, and we are getting a lot of new content. We are getting a new concept of 6-man team entry to Pinnacle activities. I think at the moment we are getting just one of them, and if I'm understanding it correctly from Bungie, we will be getting another activity at some point in June, so it'll be halfway through the season. And so far so good. We've done yesterday one of those, and is it called Overload? Let me just see. Let me just make sure that I don't get things wrong, because sometimes I get muddled with so what's happened to my Bungie page? Come on. Taking time. I've done something also silly. Just before launching my podcast here, I highlighted, well, basically I'm highlighting some of the streams, and they were on my podcast, dedicated to being a successful streamer on Twitch. So for instance, we'll have a selection of how to build your channel, how to collect your points, how to get everything sorted out, basically, if you're wanting to be running the channel. So I had a selection of podcasts in March, and they're on the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th. So it's like a 1 week of this podcast. All of these are being highlighted, but I just didn't realize that if I'm highlighting, that's going to take forever, and each one of these will have to be processed internally by Twitch. So that's what's happening at the moment with just one of them, and I apologize for that. But we are going to have an interesting collection. The difference between highlights and ordinary videos and Twitch is that highlights stay forever, right? So they're not being taken down, whilst the usual videos that you're getting are usually restricted to about 60 to 90 days of existence, and therefore all of us partners and associates, we upload everything to YouTube in order to have it fully archived. So that is the usual type of procedure that we apply in order to retain all of our content. Some streamers don't do that, but I think it's very important and valuable if you are a broadcaster, if you're doing it professionally. And also if you're a youthful Twitch streamer, you're going to have like a documentary evidence of all that you've been doing over a longer period of time, and you will have a document of your community members participating, and quite frankly, a lot of people who are engaged in online activities, like for instance joining in with Destiny multiplayer. We are going to be getting certainly a lot of requests for various excerpts and clips of the activity, and all of these are definitely very much of interest to everyone. So the idea is to have everything archived, and therefore people can choose for themselves what they want to keep. Lots of people treasure these events tremendously. It's a bit like a memory of a get-together. when you went to a football match, or you watched a theatre play, or had a school reunion, and it's very similar to this. Just the difference is that we are doing it live online, and I find it quite extraordinary how quickly we bond, how quickly we find common interests, and how quickly we become a vibrant, energetic, and very dedicated, closely bound online community. So all of that is included in the series of podcasts, and all of them, from the very first one to today, are archived on YouTube. So you can just go and type in their podcast, and you get all the dates. You can simply DRBMiller podcast, daily podcast. You get all of them, and each one of them will have a label indicating what we talked about, if there was a particular topic. Like, for instance, at the moment we are doing selection of podcasts on video gaming and epilepsy, so I'll talk about that at length in a moment. But we had the first part yesterday, and we'll have another one today, and the third one we'll obviously wrap it up all tomorrow. And for anyone who wants to be using Twitch, basically just entering the app, the highlights will be there for you to use. And I've done this because I had a number of requests from junior streamers asking lots of questions as I was doing Destiny in particular, and a few as we were doing Warzone. The questions were all about kind of streaming works. What do you need to do in order to set up and to do everything else? And funnily, the other day somebody popped in. He was randomly selected gamer in Warzone, and I think he was from Belgium. He asked about streaming, because obviously before every match I need to tell everyone that we are streaming live. It's for the legal reasons, and they have to be aware of the Twitch rules, moderators, and everything else. So it's just a sentence indicating no swearing, nothing defamatory, nothing offensive. And he was very curious, so he asked me, "Oh, how long have you been streaming?" And I said, "I'm now just about to end my 3rd year, moving towards the 4th." And he blew his top. 3 years, he shouted, so long. I obviously was a younger guy. 3 years is not that long if you are of my age, but for him probably would have been like a lifetime, and I find it hilarious. Coming back to earlier comments about perception of time, honestly, people perceive time differently, and depending also on the age bracket and what you do. You have people who have never-ending days if they do nothing, and people who feel that time's just flying by if they're very busy 24/7. It's individual. It is down to lots of different factors, and sometimes could also be affected by certain health conditions. So one way or the other, it's an interesting phenomenon, and I certainly spent some time thinking today. And I tell you, it's very interesting. I woke up at just before, I think it was about 8:10. Yeah, so it was a cycle that generally would be the best one for me. And I said, well, still didn't seem to get enough sleep, still need about extra 45 minutes, so I'll just have a nap and then wake up at 9, right? And I fell asleep, and I had a lengthy dream, which was, with a huge narrative, and it felt like the dream was lasting for at least half hour, 40 minutes longer. It was just massive, like a film, and lots of different characters and situations, and it was thoroughly enjoyable as well. It was a very pleasant dream. And then I woke up, and I thought, my goodness, I must have slept. Must be midday. It was only about 10 or 15 minutes later. I think it was like 20 to 9, 25 to 9. And when I looked it up previously, it was about 8:15. So I thought, how interesting. It was only about 10-15 minutes in between, yet the dream felt so lengthy. It felt like I slept for extra 2 or 3 hours. It's just the beauty of the unconscious and preconscious, what it gives us and how it operates. Because sometimes you sleep 9 hours and you do not remember your dreams, although you do dream, within that cycle. As you know, dreams are part and parcel of our regeneration process. And for people who are not dreaming properly, according to, but if we're looking at the mechanical cycle of sleep, they will have a serious problem, really, with their waking life. And some people develop epilepsy, and others have a huge problem with keeping awake and being fully concentrated. And a lot of these things are probably still not explored properly. And I think, some of the disorders that we've seen, like the attention hyperactivity disorder, people who have problems with concentration, people who live in a daze or are very hazy, they all can be linked to that cycle of sleep. And we need to spend a lot more time, and medical science will need to invest a lot more in that research. That will give us more data and some clear pointers in the right direction. Because I personally, from my personal experience of work with people who suffer from various neurological conditions, have quite a upbeat assessment of some of it, where I feel that lots of different experiences and occurrences were not properly analyzed or registered, and they were sort of overly simplified. And we did see that in other disciplines of psychology and psychiatry where things were perhaps a bit unclear, and therefore we resorted to what appeared to be most obvious, but actually that was not the causal factor, and certainly did not contribute to the overall condition that somebody was displaying. So, coming back to what I tried to describe earlier, override. Yeah, and I was about to call it overload, but it's actually override. So yesterday we were engaging with override for the first time, and I can certainly tell you that the experience of it has been very, very pleasant. It did include 6 people, inclusive of myself, and we had to be doing a pinnacle mission, which in fact was very difficult, a bit like a nightfall strike. And if I'm not mistaken, I did not have the right mod in order to tackle the boss, because the boss didn't take any damage from me whatsoever. At least that was the impression I had. And so it really, Destiny had now evolved into well, we've gone into a new chapter, a new stage of the game development. We really have quite a lot of different activities that were previously not there, and Override basically gives us a combination of what we previously had in Gambit, because you need to be getting mods and depositing them earlier in this mission in order to progress forward. So it's very similar, one section of it, like the old Gambit Prime, and then you're progressing to the areas which is similar to Siva Heroic Strikes, and then later you'll come to an area which is like a raid. So it's 3 activities in one, and I think it's really good if it comes in as a season, because it gives us a variety, and it will complement the raids and all the other activities that are there continuously. And the idea is to be rotating a variety of these every single week. So I entered one of them yesterday. I didn't want to miss out on it, because I really felt that as I've come to the end of the first week, the reset was at 6 o'clock PM, and I really didn't want to miss the activity, and I think it went really well. You can see it on our playback, and generally what is happening at present is we have quite a great number of activities given to us through the new season, so it's actually reminiscent of year 2. The most important thing that Bungie had created is the new system through which you are going to be able to see all the tasks attributed to every single week of the season. So that's extremely important, because you will have every single week clearly spelled out with 10 tasks that you need to be completing, and it's different to the bounties and everything else, which I believe were somewhat confusing, and I couldn't really find exactly at any moment what I was supposed to be doing. The other thing is that they're not disappearing at the end of every week, so throughout the entire duration of the season, which is 12 weeks long, you are going to have everything on display, and very clearly you are going to be able to follow every one of these, and make sure that you're completing, progressing, and doing everything necessary for the seasonal content, and you will be able to collect literally every single section of it. So it's very nicely, prominently, clearly displayed for everyone to find and to follow, and also it complements all the other activities. I think there have been some complaints about the length of some of these missions, because you need to be collecting what are they called? You need to collect some materials first. Oh yeah, ether. You need to collect ether in order to get a key, and then a key is going to be serving you once you enter some of these activities, because you'll unlock chests. And yesterday I actually did miss out on the second chest. I was just looking at the first one. The second one was giving me a lot of glimmer and other rewards. I didn't realize there were just 2 of them. I think the first one popped up first, and then the other one appeared a bit later, and I just missed it because I was busy collecting all the other loot and engrams. The idea is, as always, greater the difficulty, better the loot, and therefore I think Override is presently the most popular activity in Destiny 2, and justifiably so. A very, very good, very well developed activity. I also think that expanding a 3-man team to a 6-piece is going to be of huge advantage, and particularly so when you get crossplay. Cross-platform access will then bring in people from everywhere, and it's going to be no problem in finding your new teammates, and it will really help everyone who's a Destiny streamer to build a community. So really good, and you really don't know where to start, really, quite frankly. What's interesting is I purchased the season of the Splicer on Friday, and suddenly I had all the other DLCs unlocked. So that's peculiar. It must be a glitch. Suddenly I was to be replaying Shadowkeep, Beyond Light, and what was the other one? Forsaken. And all of these have been already fully completed, but some last few sections of Beyond Light, campaign that is, of course. And that was very strange, but very enjoyable. And I actually made a mistake. I went down the route of playing Beyond Light from last Wednesday, when in fact I could have gone down the route of seasonal content. To be fair, I purchased the seasonal content I think on Thursday, so I wanted to present you with the content combining the both. The best of the both worlds, because there are lots of people who've not really completed Beyond Light or still toying with the idea. The best thing about Destiny on Xbox Game Pass is that you're getting a huge discount if you want to be purchasing any of the seasons. They're sold separately, no longer in a bundle as a requirement. So I purchased mine for £7.25, which is probably the cheapest ever that I would have had for any seasonal content, and that was 25% off due to my Ultimate subscription. And that's great, and I think it's been really good. I really think it's brilliant that Bungie made those seasons separate, that you did not need to be buying the big bundle with everything included, which obviously would have been seen as purely monetary. And don't forget, people in the times of the pandemic do not have any money, and lots of people are stranded with jobs, accommodation and everything else, but many people treasure activities online, and they will find them as essential as buying bread and water. So milk, whatever you call it, they find it as essential as you could say water and air for humans. It's become part and parcel of everyday existence, and so many friendships, so many close bonds and communities are indeed online, and therefore it becomes like a necessity. The only other difficulty is if you are playing lots of games that have seasonal content, then that amalgamates. So I, for instance, can tell you that for Warzone and for Destiny, we have two separate seasons pretty much launched at the same time. And then obviously, if I want to be buying the Battle Pass and it's invest, extra £10 or 8, 7, 8, whatever the price is for the add-on that would have been given to us with the season related to Warzone, and then the list just goes on and on. But nevertheless, I'm quite careful with my investments, and when I feel that it is necessary or justified, I'll pursue it. And obviously for Destiny and for everything we've done here, it's very important to be entering the seasons, because the seasons are giving you kind of half and half. You get lots of the content for free, and then you get some which is indeed on the price, on the money, you could say, and basically you get it then as part of the package. And you can, if you purchase it towards the end, you can unlock everything, and but it's obviously great to be fully kept abreast with the news, with all activities, that you are there on the first day, because generally people, a bit like with film premieres, they like watching things as early as possible and collecting the items and participating in a wonderful, very energetic online activity. So it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Our session yesterday was also about 4 hours long, so a bit longer than usual. We'll try to do the same thing today. And we have plenty of time to get on with everything. I'm just I did have a look yesterday before going to bed, and they already launched week 2, so I have about 9 tasks to complete from week 1, and then crack on with extra 10 for the second week of this season. And we'll just do the list. We'll go through everything that needs to be completed, and that will be our priority at the moment. I don't want to be coming to the end of the season and then discovering that half the things were not done. But there's a lot of loot, there's lots of items, and I quite like the idea of needing to do several things in order to access the content, therefore making Destiny perhaps a bit more complicated and tricky, and even more so very dependent on community membership. And that's been really one of the greatest assets, the greatest strengths of this Bungie's masterpiece. And we know from the beginning, no in-game tutors, but your community members who could tell you what to do. And I learned everything from them. I learned everything from our chums here, and progressed within 6 months to what I would have done maybe in several years. And we've had also several confirmations in here, but it was just down to the genuine, generous help coming from various participants, and I'm just hoping that all of them are healthy, safe and well during the times of the pandemic, and that they will all join us here for our Destiny 2 sessions as we carry on. So that's really all about Destiny, and we also had a wonderful session of Warzone, lots of good matches. We have generally always a team of our regulars, what I call them our usual suspects, and every single day we meet after 4 o'clock and we have a session which lasts roughly between 3 and 4 hours, and have a lot of fun, talk about our tactics and strategies. Yesterday, and I need to stress this, we had yet again some problems with the server access, and we observed that on Mondays after 5 o'clock there is a significant lag, so anybody who is coming from European servers is getting killed rather easy. And we did observe that already for a great number of weeks, certainly since we rejoined the community in October. And we did observe that yesterday, that between 4 and 5, no, actually I should say before 6 o'clock, not 5 o'clock, hang on a minute, 6 o'clock, yeah. I think before 6 o'clock we were alright, we had some really good scores, but then between 6 and 7:30, as we had the server reset, which happens always on Tuesday, there were serious problems, and we couldn't do a thing. You could really tell that everybody else was able to see us at least 3 seconds before we saw them. Our hits didn't register. It was a complete chaos and nightmare. We were a bit disappointed, but knowing the reason made it easier to swallow and digest. So after 7:30 to about 8:30, we had again a couple of good matches and scored really well. Became, I think, we were within the last 5 bracket a couple of times, which indeed was what we always strive to achieve. So a very good session. Today we also have Warzone after 4 o'clock, and there will be Destiny from 1 onwards. So a lot to do. I really want to make Destiny a regular occurrence here on our stream, considering the volume that Bungie are offering, and there's so many different things to do, and it'd be interesting for our veterans to watch, to participate, and for the newbies and rookies to learn, really. All of that is indeed to be delivered as we go along. There'll be lots of sessions of Destiny, and I think considering how slim our Destiny 1 streams were of late, we are going to be entirely focusing on this one. And as I said, I will be kept busy with all the tasks, and the idea certainly that they wanted to have Unlinked to the Seasons was constantly giving you extras, and I think really compared to the year 2, the year 3 and part of year 4 were not received too well. They were seen as providing us with a lot of repetitive content, and particularly the last year in view of the pandemic. So that would have been from about February to until today, and last week I should say. And they've gone down the route of beefing up the content, and there's a lot to do. But I think if you are considering that the game's reworked and it feels like gaming progress on the campaign side of things, this is going to be a very greatly appreciated innovation with new activities, Pinnacle weekly missions, Override and Expunge and anything else, because people will be then getting in and playing it similar to the Crucible, and I find it to be much better than Crucible. Crucible in Destiny is a brief, short deathmatch, and chaos generally, all based on speed and fast access, and that doesn't provide me with any gratification. There's no reward, but maybe the rewards that you complete, like some of the bounties, and get some weapons. I think Override and Expunge are a lot better, and these are the activities where you're really excelling. You need to be a bit more tactical, you need to strategize, you need to do your own thing. And I wish they would do also something similar to Warzone, so you would have a very large map like Europa where you could do Battle Royale Destiny style. And I will write to Bungie and ask whether they could really consider that sort of thing. Whether it will be possible or not, we'll see. But I think it's certainly coming, considering how popular Battle Royale is. And I find the Crucible quite meaningless. It's just nothing for me in it. And I've done it many times with our community. Obviously people like doing it, but compared to the rest of the game, it's probably its weakest spot, hence the most popular. Anyway, it's just my own take on it. Much prefer some other PvP games and activities elsewhere. So we'll have a lot to do in Destiny. A lot more is to follow, so stay with us once we get back to it. Okay, so let's have a look at the news. We had some veterans popping in yesterday. Tonzak popped in and he said hello. I was very, very sad to hear that he had been very seriously ill of late, and he said it is going to take quite some time for him to recover. So we all wish him the very best, and we just hope that you are going to be getting the best possible medical care, sir, and that the treatments you're receiving are going to be facilitating your recovery. We want everybody in our community to be healthy, safe and well. So please do take it easy, rest well, stay at home, and don't do anything which is going to be creating any form of pressure, strain, and make sure you rest well, sleep well, eat well, and adhere to the treatments, and things are going to be as good as always. And we are always here to support our friends. So if Tonzak or any other friends of ours experience any major difficulties, always bring us a message. Find us here live online or through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or email, and we always will be there for you. Discord also is a very good forum for us to connect. It's a bit of a private forum. We obviously get people in by invitation, but the kind of the core of our veterans and participants are always going to be there and more than willing to help. So please do not hesitate to ask or to disclose any information to us. It is going to be treated with with utmost confidentiality, and we are there to support and help, as we've done for the last year and literally throughout 3 years of my channel here on Twitch. I always try to enable a strong community membership which was all-inclusive, family-friendly, in order to help people who are in some form of difficulty. So that was the idea behind the channel. I'm very pleased to say that we have quite a number of people who've gone through serious health issues, and they're all participating here very frequently and enjoying everything we do. So that's fantastic. It's almost like having a large group therapy, occupational therapy session where many people come in every day and participate and feel brilliant, terrific afterwards. So that's wonderful. Don't forget, anyone who is experiencing a form of difficulty is frequently feeling alone, and that itself is a contributing factor when it comes to how to deal with certain issues. And it's very important that nobody during the times of the pandemic, if experiencing mental health issues or any other, is feeling alone. And today, with the tech that we've got before us, with all the forums and Twitch streams and YouTube channels, we really should never ever feel alone. We just need to be brave enough to connect, to talk, and make sure that our world becomes a better place. Today we are going to be looking yet again at epilepsy and video gaming. We talked about it yesterday, and I was very, very pleased to be able to read the article written by Liana Rupert. She is the associate editor, I believe. Let me just confirm that. Bear with me. Indeed, she is associate editor of Game Informer. We are going to be looking at some other articles that Liana had written. She's a former US military veteran who sustained injury and sadly developed epilepsy as a consequence, and she dedicated her future career, which was based on a previous hobby of video gaming, to the exploration of how video games work for people with certain health issues, inclusive of epilepsy. So I'll focus on that, and I will present you with a lot more facts and figures very, very shortly. Bear with me, my voice is really playing up today. I'm not sure what it is. I need to really remedy it. I'll be back in a moment. do apologise, my voice was suddenly becoming really croaky, and I had to really get a hot drink and remedy this. I'm not sure what's causing it, because it seemed to have been perfectly alright earlier today. You never know. Anyway, we were talking about video gaming and epilepsy, so the next section of my podcast is going to be dedicated to it. We looked at Liana Rupert's article yesterday, and she specifically talked about epilepsy and destiny. So if you're interested, just go back to yesterday's podcast, hit that play button, and you'll be able to access it all. And she was definitely talking about certain sequences and parts of the game where you have a lot of flashing lights, where you are picking up on frame rate drop when you're getting into an area of activity where there's a lot of bright colors. And she specified exactly what chapters and what sections indeed could be contributing to an occurrence of epileptic seizure. So that was very interesting. But today we'll be looking at another article of hers, and the article is indeed called A Guide to Gaming for People with Epilepsy. So we'll have a look at it. First of all, for anyone who's not familiar, we need to define what epilepsy is. It is a neurological condition which comprises a number of different mental and biological states where we are experiencing an abnormal electrical discharge. So that electrical discharge could affect consciousness, or it could affect movement, or indeed could result in a so-called clonic-tonic seizure. And this is what we also know commonly as grand mal fit. Basically, a person who is experiencing this abnormal electrical discharge becomes unconscious, falls on the ground, starts shaking, falls into deep sleep after a few minutes of the seizure, or a few moments of the seizure, and then wakes up. So other people will not experience such severe seizures, but they will have what we know as Petymal or partial seizures, and they will be affecting consciousness. They'll have periods of absence. They will have moments where they suddenly have like a blackout where they can't see anything, or indeed sometimes it will be interfering with their concentration, with their attention, and frequently with their temperament, with their mood, with the way they feel. So it's a very complex, very difficult neurological condition that indeed manifests itself in very many different ways. In the old days, epilepsy was assumed to be a condition where people would have just grand mal fits, but that, we know that this is not the case. Similar to autism and Asperger's, there are quite a variety of different conditions attached to what we call epilepsy, and therefore a lot more work, research and dedication is being given to that within the fields of neurology, psychiatry and medical science in order for us to get a better understanding. And I certainly think Liana's work is fundamentally important, because she is looking at what we know as photosensitive epilepsy, i.e. people who are susceptible to flashing lights and bright colors, and therefore having them as triggers for the seizures. And she has written quite a lot on quite a variety of different experiences that she personally had, and attributed certain factors and figures to particular games. And I think her guide to gaming for people with epilepsy is incredibly invaluable, not just for people who are suffering from it, but for everyone else. Because don't forget, if we are playing video games extensively, they are going to be having an effect on our neurological responses, from within us. And we know that excessive gaming, like the games with lots of bright colors, flashing lights, Doom, Destiny, you name it, will have certain effect even on people who do not have any form of neurological condition. And it's definitely worthy of note. It's worthy of greater considerations, because we'll look at what can be happening to a person who indeed is suffering from epilepsy, or indeed what effects such games will have on those who do not have it but are still having some degree of interference. So let's have a look what Liana Rupert said. She says, a common misconception about seizures is that they only happen to people with epilepsy. Well, that is absolutely not true. Seizures can occur in anyone. There is also no one type of epileptic seizure or episode, which means learning about triggers can be a tricky process. With accessibility in gaming becoming more of a priority within the gaming space, studios are finally beginning to look at the impact of certain effects on those susceptible to neurological episodes beyond simply slapping a warning label on games and calling it a day. You would have seen when you go to IMAX or to your cinema when you are to be watching blockbusters, AAA blockbusters like Hunger Games or Avengers, that these warnings are being given, and I have seen that in my local IMAX. It's a very big sign saying anyone who has what says epilepsy needs to be very careful and perhaps not watch the sequences where the flashing lights are present, because they could trigger off seizures. So that indeed has been already considered for some time, and the warnings are given, but Liana is asking whether this is just good enough. So she says, as someone who has seizures due to an injury from a time when I was active duty in the military, the years following this new development have been a steep learning curve for me when navigating some of my favorite and most anticipated games. I no longer can enjoy titles like Dead Space freely as I used to, which open up an entirely new world of development that never entered my scope of awareness. Well, sadly, the game like Dead Space, with a lot of flashing lights and frame rate dropping and all sorts of other possible triggers for the seizures, is then becoming a game that one can't play, and I'm very, very sad to hear that. Since seizures have become my new norm, which means she obviously has seizures quite frequently, I often make sure to pay special attention to certain design choices that can be harmful to those sensitive to neurological traps. That way, I can decide for myself if something is safe to play and see if there is a way to work around those obstacles, and try to offer some navigational tools for others that may be facing similar roadblocks. For those who experience any type of seizure, or those who live in the same household with someone with epileptic tendencies, here is our guide to gaming for people with epilepsy. So she said, I open up about certain types of triggers in an article back in December, so it was quite recent, it was 5 or 6 months ago, regarding Cyberpunk 2077, because I have seen the articles that popped up on Game Informer, and they were, I think, the first industry magazine that indeed highlighted this in Cyberpunk. Since then, CD Projekt Red took the necessary steps to make very small tweaks to make the title a little safer for everyone. I've also been hit with a plethora of questions from gamers with epilepsy, parents of children susceptible to seizures, and also studios looking to make more educated design choices. Because of this interest, and in the interest of continuing to make gaming something that everyone can enjoy, here are a few tips that I've learned through the years when approaching new adventures in the digital space. But first, let's talk about the different varieties of seizures before laying out some tips. So we'll look in depth into what epilepsy is. I've given you a bit of a taster initially, describing the difference between petit mal and grand mal and the way people are affected, but now she's going to be giving us an in-depth look. So it's important to remember that epilepsy is a broad term covering many specific areas of neurological divergence. To put it in plain English, this is not just one single illness. It's a selection of different types of illnesses and disturbances and disorders, which indeed are connected to what appears to be an abnormal electrical discharge. It's quite a variety, and she will be giving us a good selection of these examples. Yet again, I apologize. My voice is just not good today. I don't know what's happening. It's just caused me lots of problems. So she says that it is not one disease. There are many different patterns and triggers that differ from person to person. While doctors and scientists continue to trigger more about epileptic triggers and how to prevent them, here is a general overview of the different types of epilepsies and the associated symptoms with them. So number 1, generalized epilepsy. Seizures start on both sides of the brain with 2 distinct kinds of symptoms. Generalized motor seizures, they're known as grand mal seizures. They can cause a loss of body control, loss of consciousness, and a stiffening and tweaking of muscles. Terminology includes clonic, tonic, and myclonic. So it's clonic tonic seizures, grand mal seizures, it's the same thing. Generalized non-motor seizures, known as Petymal Seizures, often results in a zoning out for the person affected. Small tweaks to facial features, most common is lip smacking. Terminology includes typical, atypical, and myclonic, also called absent seizures because it can seem like a person affected is not really there. This could also happen with the seizures, with the states where people suddenly have like an absence. They have like a mental block. Suddenly they're in a void. They can't really bring back the words. They find themselves in a space where everything is a bit like a treacle. It does happen quite frequently to people who are having the major generalized epilepsy, and they will be happening for a very, very short period of time, so it's literally a couple of seconds, and then they come back to normal. Frequently, the absence seizures, I'll just add to what Liana said, would be occurring if a person is physically and mentally tired. It can be later in a day if they had a day full of activities that were quite tiring, and overall experience of that person is under some form of duress, be it mental or physical, and therefore it's very important for anyone who has the condition to make sure that they're having plenty of rest. It's fundamental. Good night's sleep, sometimes afternoon siesta naps, will help and alleviate some of these pressures, and therefore absence seizures will be less frequent. Focal epilepsy. Seizures will typically focus on one part of the brain, also called partial seizures. Focal epilepsy is typically categorized in 4 different categories. Category number 1. Focal aware. The person is aware of the seizure happening. So that's when people know that the seizure is happening. So it's quite a different experience compared to those who are not aware of it, who are completely devoid of any form of awareness, or they're divorced from even knowing that the seizure will occur. Number 2, focal impaired awareness. The person is often confused during an episode, sometimes with no recollection at all. So a person might do certain things and then later they can't remember it. Focal motor. The person will experience some uncontrolled movement, twitching, muscle spasms, repeat extremity movements, aimless walking. So it happens when you are doing something which is completely out of ordinary for a short period of time, and it is very similar to the absence seizures. Focal non-motor. The person affected usually will not exhibit external symptoms. Instead, more internal aspects are present, like confusion, heart racing, a drastic drop in temperature, and more. So that is a bit like suddenly you are sweating and you're feeling really dizzy and highly confused, and you don't know why, just out of the blue. So generalized and focal epilepsy. This means the person affected has a blend of 2 epileptic types when seen above. And Liana says that this is the type that I have. So she will be experiencing 2 separate symptoms, perhaps the ones which are, including that sweating and racy heartbeat and confusion, together with maybe absence seizures, where she suddenly can't really remember anything and it's like a blackout. It is a very serious condition for anyone who has to be doing something that requires attention, diligence, and it's a very, very serious illness, and in some cases mental disorder, which can impair a person's life quite tremendously unless the person concerned is taking necessary steps to understand first of all what's happening and take necessary steps to minimize its effects. A lot of people who have epilepsy do not adhere to the procedure in which they would refrain from, let's say, drinking coffees, drinking highly caffeinated drinks, drinking fizzy drinks with a lot of saccharin and sugar, or you would get people who are perhaps sometimes even drinking alcohol. All these substances will affect our central nervous system and therefore will contribute to some of these seizures. It's very important to adhere to a very healthy routine and make sure that anything that can trigger a seizure or any form of disturbance on that level is fully eliminated. And evidently we'll spend a bit of time in a moment looking at how, for instance, watching certain images, be it through television shows or watching films in cinema, as well as video games on our television screens, could in fact contribute to some of these. The last one is the unknown epilepsy, i.e. the unknown origin. So that there is still so much unknown about epilepsy and how it's caused, what triggers it, and the overall treatment. Unknown categorization means that the seizure can happen at any time long after birth, and symptoms and triggers have no discernible pattern. So triggers can come from a variety of places for me. Flashing lights at a certain rate can almost certainly guarantee a seizure, so she must not be watching anything which is flashing. It's photosensitive epilepsy. This is something that most photosensitive epileptics have to be aware of. While sometimes seizures can occur with no discernible trigger, a few common irritants are known that are good to be aware of. So, like I said, there are certain triggers and factors that people can certainly eliminate from their day-to-day existence, and you need to pay attention if any of these were to be occurring. Number one is sleep deprivation. That's critical. The how to put it, the EEG, the overnight EEG, which you will have if you are suspecting to be having epilepsy, will provide you exactly with your pattern of sleep, and within the pattern of sleep will have how your REM movement is responding to flashing lights or indeed to sleep deprivation, and this is where we will get the abnormal EEG activity, and that will help us with obviously the diagnosis. So it's sleep deprivation, it's specific hours of the day, when you are ill or with a fever, stress, because specific hours of the day is important. Some people always have their seizures at a specific time of the day. So for instance, some people who have delayed REM sleep may experience epilepsy just after they woke up. So it's within the first hour on waking. Other people have it later in the day before going to bed. So there are physical reasons as to why that is, and if that is the case, it needs to be thoroughly investigated for people to know exactly when such seizures are likely to take place, and then take necessary steps in order to remedy. So being ill with fever is one of the factors. Stress is the other, a very important factor. Stress affects the overall encephalography, which means our electrical activity in brain. So when we are stressed, our muscles tighten up and we are generally feeling under a huge amount of pressure. Therefore, the electrical discharge could well be responding by getting out of control. Flashing lights at a certain rate, speed and color, most commonly red and white. So red and white flashing, or like we have in Destiny, they will certainly have an effect. Alcohol or excessive drug consumption. Well, drugs and alcohol are non-starter for anyone who has any form of neurological imbalance. Women can sometimes be more susceptible with their menstrual cycle. And diet restriction, drastic changes in diet. So it means that people are then changing completely what they've been eating all along, and that could have an impact on biochemistry, and therefore the electrical discharge may well be responding. Certain medications could have a tremendous impact, and as you know, people will be diagnosed and given certain types of medicaments for epilepsy. So it's very unlikely that somebody who is given Epilum will be also given carbamazepine, for instance, because they have a very, very different type of function, and it will depend where epilepsy is assumed to be originating from within your brain and the central nervous system. Heat or extreme cold, very important. Heat is accelerating the overall heart pressure, heart rate, and therefore there is a chance that if there's very hot weather, people are more susceptible to certain types of seizures. Hormone shifts and excess caffeine. I would actually correct that. I would say caffeine in general. It's a very strong stimulant, and it does have an effect on, first of all, the sleeping pattern, the sleeping cycle, and therefore people who are drinking a lot of coffee will certainly be affected. Tips. Knowing what sort of epilepsy you experience or those around you is really the key. Still, the reality is that so many people go undiagnosed because it's hard to spot, especially with the local and focal types. They can be difficult to document in a professional setting. Well, the only way to diagnose is by doing very, very thorough tests. I mean, we need to do EEG, we need to do maybe PET scan and CT, maybe sometimes there needs to be a nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR scan, and all the scans and all the readings together will provide a very, very clear picture. EEG is probably the most important for abnormal electric discharge, although not always will it detect the less specific epilepsies. So therefore, somebody may need to do a waking EEG and then the one at night, and then sometimes they need to be disturbed during the night, i.e. woken up, in order to get the readings. So there are quite a few different tests which will help the diagnose for the illness to be diagnosed. But on the other hand, it's all down to the signs and symptoms. That's the other factor. And if people are not disclosing the symptoms, which indeed are very present, and sometimes people are not aware of them, so you may have a subject together with their family members or their partners who will need to describe everything together. So others will notice something that the subject is not fully aware of, and therefore that can be thoroughly investigated. And I experienced seizures for 2 years before my doctor was finally able to discern a pattern to trigger one. He was able to capture a seizure on camera in a controlled environment, because it's hard to diagnose or can sometimes even be a one-off occurrence, there are no set of guidelines for preventing them. So that being said, the below tricks are what I've implemented in my daily life regarding games, movies and TV. Number 1. Sit at least 2 feet away from the screen if possible. It's very important. You must not be close to the screen. Closer to the screen, worse it will get. Try to keep your gaming area well lit to reduce the impact of flashing lights as the sole focus. So you must not be playing your games in a room which is not brightly lit. And also your screen perhaps could be turned to less contrast or less brightness overall. That's the next point you said, dim your screen's brightness. Invest in a monitor TV screen that offers an eye saver mode. This will eliminate blue light, which has helped me with red and white flashing. It's very important. Remember that. Some monitors offer glare guards and flicker-free settings. Gamer glasses, like the ones from Gunnar, will also help as well. Let me see what they say here. So these are special glasses that are giving you optimal performance and blue light protection. So that's what I mentioned yesterday. These glasses will be very useful if you are playing video games. And they said they're especially good if an eye-saving mode monitor isn't available at this time. Try not to play a game if you're in a state of exhaustion, if you're physically tired. Do not forget to take breaks often, and that will need to be every 45 minutes to an hour. Pay attention to, and also very important, when you're taking breaks, walk around a bit, have a bit of fresh air, drink a lot of water. Pay attention to how you're feeling. If you start to feel off, do not ignore that. Identify what triggered that change in feeling and take a moment to step away. In extreme instances, for games like Cyberpunk 2077, you can also alternate covering one eye over the other and switching off periodically. This is especially helpful for people who suffer from focal epilepsy, so you're not having a grand mal seizure, but it's affecting you mentally, get into the blocks and absence seizures. Try not to play anything when you're at home alone if possible. Well, if you are suffering from grand mal epilepsy, it's absolutely ill-advised to be playing anything or doing anything if you're alone, and generally you shouldn't be alone if you are doing an activity that could trigger off seizures. So make sure that you are there with somebody. If you live alone, have a planning space with a close friend or neighbor if you are in the need of help. Play around with in-game settings, disable motion blur if applicable. Some games, especially indies, will offer alternative game modes that dim flickering effects in games, like glitch effects, hacking effects, etc. So there's a big question in there that she's asking, and I guess it's a question that others may ask, people who are not involved with the field of neurology or psychiatry. Do video games cause epilepsy? Well, the answer is absolutely not. Video game cannot be causing epilepsy. Epilepsy is a health condition which is based on internal biological factors, or indeed, as in Liana's case, on injury, which would have caused it. If you have an injury, then certainly it could affect the way your CNS works, and sometimes there could be viruses. Remember that. COVID virus can cause epilepsy, and the virus I had could well have caused me epilepsy as well, because once you get to that degree of CNS imbalance, anything can happen. And very frequently for people who would have had encephalitis or meningitis, the collateral could well be one of those epilepsies. So there are lots of different viruses, viral infections, injuries, and internal imbalances which are still not clearly defined medically that indeed are causing epilepsy. So video games cannot cause epilepsy. However, they can trigger the seizures. It's a very big difference between triggering a seizure in somebody who already has the condition and perhaps is fully unaware of it, and then causing it. So she says they can trigger epileptic episodes, but you will not suddenly develop a tendency for seizures by playing a lot of games. It's quite clear that the exposure to video games does not make you become a person with epilepsy. And that says Giuseppe Erba, medical doctor from the University of Rochester Medical Center, in guidelines from the Epilepsy Foundation, which is in the US. Video games also impact a much smaller amount of people that you might think. While the exact number is still unknown, it is estimated that children that exhibit photosensitive seizures only amount to about 4 to 9% of the population. Adults are harder to diagnose for a numeric measurement due to diagnosis complications with susceptibility that goes down with age. The risk of having a seizure if you are sensitive is only 1 out of 17,000 viewers. If you're young, continues Erba, if you are older, it is even less. It is 1 out of 90,000. Those numbers sound low, right? While the answer to that is yes, that doesn't mean that studios can't take steps needed to make games safer. Sometimes the changes are so minuscule that a player could have no idea a change even occurred unless they were told. While the number of people with epilepsy that are confirmed with the diagnosis is relatively small, there are so many that are not diagnosed, which means they're more liable, more susceptible to seizures without even knowing, and instances where a seizure occurs with no previous disposition. So, she says, looking ahead, in my case, my epilepsy, and that is for Liana, my epilepsy is a symptom, not a cause. I never had a single neurological issue before the service, but a brain injury changed that for me. When I suffered my first grand mal seizure while playing Deadpool on Xbox 360, I almost died. Oh, that's terrible. Honestly, when I hear that, this is just absolutely distressing. I lost control of my entire body, including continence, which is a little embarrassing, and my husband says that I was screaming that my skin was on fire. Since then, I've had numerous grand mal seizures. I'm constantly learning new triggers and ways to make day-to-day life safer. TV, movies, games, they all potentially could trigger a seizure for me, and many like me, sometimes those seizures can be fatal. As you could see, this is really dreadful because even if you're so highly conscious and fully aware of the condition, you really feel it could prevent you from so many different activities in life, and you've got to find the right balance between watching something you like or doing the activity, like for instance video games, and then not overdoing it, because really there will be cut-off points where the activity will become inherently damaging. And I'm sure Liana, together with other people who are in that position, will be always monitoring how greatly a particular activity is going to affect them. And she said they all potentially could trigger a seizure for me and many like me, and sometimes those seizures can be fatal. Well, generally it's very rare that somebody would die after a seizure all by itself, but what does happen if somebody is in an environment where they can hit the head or sustain serious injury, like for instance fall on the table and there's glass in there, and then they bleed to death, or they sustain additional injury, which in fact results in instant death, because obviously in that neurological state, the body, the organism will react differently to threat, and these are sadly very rare incidents which unfortunately do happen. I recently sat down with Microsoft Senior Gaming Accessibility Program Manager Brannon Zahad to discuss how Xbox is making strides with game development and people with epilepsy. We're always exploring new ways where we can innovate in the accessibility space, whether it's hardware, games, the platform itself, or it's our services, he said. Epilepsy was actually one of my first experiences with the disability community, he said. When I was in 4th grade, a coach of mine had a seizure on the court while we were playing, which caused a significant injury when he fell. I think many people simply do not understand how impactful and dangerous a seizure can be. So it's a topic that for my team, and I bring up regularly when working with publishers and developers. He also said, we have developed the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines, or XAGs, which are a set of best practices as defined in partnership with members of the gaming and disability community and with other industry experts. We share these with developers, which they can use for design ideation as well as validating the accessibility of the games. We have one XAG dedicated to photosensitivity, which suggests avoiding certain display patterns and the use of industry standard tests to help ensure products are as safe as possible. As for working with people with disabilities, the Xbox user research team has been doing a fantastic job of helping us bring more and more of the disability community in to provide us with feedback on our products. So it means that people are being brought in to test the products, to be fully involved, provide feedback the best possible. Xbox is really excelling. I mean, Microsoft really is many miles ahead from everyone else. I would say even Sonic years ahead from some of them. That includes individuals on the neurodiversity spectrum, and we've had other mechanisms in place as well, such as inclusive design sprints and a gaming accessibility bootcamp, where our studios have the opportunity to sit down face to face with our community and take the feedback. With the strides in accessibility through the years, I'm confident that more players than ever before can enjoy the world of gaming, And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop a comment below. I also recommend learning more with the Epilepsy Foundation of America. We also have a similar type of organization in here in Britain. So anybody interested, anybody wants to know more, you can just hit them up with a question or an email. It's a National Society for Epilepsy in Britain, and in here it's Epilepsy Foundation of America. A resource that has been invaluable in ongoing research and helping all of those worried about their possible epileptic tendencies. So once again, the article, which is wonderful, and this is a very brilliant, very in-depth analysis of what can happen to people who are suffering from epilepsy and playing video games, was indeed created by Liana Rupert. She is the associate editor of Game Informer, and she's a very, very great fan of Dragon Age and Mass Effect, widely passionate about all things in gaming community, from shooters to RPGs, and she will do all of them. Obviously, being a former soldier, she will be very, very interested in FPS games. But it's sad, it's really sad to see that somebody who had sustained that sort of injury during their military service indeed suffered epilepsy, and therefore their activities and the overall engagement with work had to be so greatly affected. It pains me to see that. I worked with quite a number of people who had neurological diseases and people who suffered from injuries, and I forgot to say earlier, I had several patients in the past who were suffering from various brain tumors, and then after the tumors were extracted and they were basically liberated from the disease, they developed quite a number of different neurological symptoms, many of which fell into that category of temporal lobe epilepsy, focal seizures, partial seizures, Petymal, you name it. And sadly, it is what happens sometimes. So, what's important is for us as gamers and broadcasters to be fully aware of these conditions, and we want to be always fully inclusive here whilst broadcasting, and we want to raise these issues. We want to make sure that others are perhaps a bit more alerted to the fact that not everyone can be enjoying the lifestyle that some people take for granted. So it's very important to remember. And I really thank Liana Rupert for doing the research and for publishing such wonderful articles and guides. Really absolutely terrific. And for somebody who worked in senior mental health services, I'm delighted to see that there are pioneers out there who are doing the research and the work entirely through their dedication and their passion for their belief is the cause. The cause is to highlight issues that others are not aware of, and I applaud Liana and everyone else for doing this. So we'll carry on with our discussion on epilepsy and video gaming tomorrow. There will be another article which I will be analyzing and telling you about, and also, like what Liana said, I wish to ask all of my community members to very seriously consider all of these. If you're interested, you can find Liana's articles on my Twitter, or indeed if you just type Liana Rupert epilepsy on Google, you will get all of the articles she has written. All of them will pop up immediately, and most importantly, the big one, An Epileptic's Guide to Gaming, the one that I was describing and analyzing today, is definitely going to be easily accessible. Make sure you have a look at it, read it, share it, raise the awareness. We had, I think it was last week, the Mental Health Day, the International Day, where everybody was dedicating a moment at a time to remember those amongst us who are suffering from a variety of psychological difficulties. And I'd say we can just raise the issue on any day. We don't have to wait for that International Day to resort to it, and have a look and then send me a message, send me some feedback, and most importantly, if you're a person who's suffering from epilepsy, if you've had some issues which relate to video gaming, then absolutely just ping me a message, and all of your disclosures will be treated in strictest confidence, and I will be very, very glad to hear from you, your experiences, what you are doing in order to remedy, what steps you've taken to prevent the occurrence of seizures, what you advise others to do. I think that's really, when it comes to psychological health, it's all about our learning experience. We all have to learn from people who are suffering, and we need to have a friendly ear. We need to be very, very passionate about the work, and first of all, we need to be very, very patient. It's very important. I can certainly tell you, people who play Warzone and Apex and start ranting and screaming, well, they will have a difficulty in, well, no, maybe I'm taking too far, because that is a very hectic, very anxiety-inducing activity, very different to what we do in everyday life, but patience is the key. Okay, so that's it for today. That was my podcast dedicated to epilepsy and video gaming, and hope you find some of my descriptions of interest. I hope that you are going to be pinging us some messages and thoughts on your experiences, or indeed if you've seen anybody else having the collateral after they played video games. And feel free to engage, feel free to talk, feel free to connect with other community members worldwide and present them with your own personal experiences. Right, so we come to the end of our podcast for today. We'll carry on with our adventures in Destiny very, very shortly. After that, there will be Warzone, so stay with us. A lot more is to come. For all of you who are departing, I wish you all a very, very good afternoon.